Welcome, everyone. My name is Octavio Rodriguez, and I am the Principal Criminal Justice Researcher at SANDAG. We thank you very much for being in this second community forum. The community forum will be conducted in English, but we will have simultaneous translation into Spanish available. I will ask our interpreter Vinca to give us the instructions on how to access to the simultaneous translation.
Good evening. In just a short bit, the interpretation feature will be activated, at which time you will see at the bottom of your screen a globe type of icon, and you're going to want to select that and the language in which you want to listen. That will allow you to listen in the preferred language. En un momentito van a activar el recurso de interpretación. Va a aparecer en pantalla un globo terráqueo al calce de la pantalla. Va a querer seleccionar eso y el idioma en que prefiere escuchar, que sería español si usted está escuchando en español. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Vinca. Again, as I mentioned, I'm the Criminal Justice Manager at SANDAG, and we are conducting these community forums as part of the Alternatives to Incarceration project. Through this project, SANDAG wants to welcome San Diego County residents to share their thoughts on the county's justice system, public safety, and provisions of behavioral health services. The structure of this panel, this webinar, is going to be a 15-minute overview of this project, the ATI project, followed by 90 minutes for public comment. We welcome everyone for being here tonight. Your insights will be extremely valuable for a project. As you will see, your cameras and microphones will be muted, but if you want to comment, please raise a hand on your Zoom reactions and we will allow you to use your microphone. Also, if you feel comfortable, we would love to know who you are, if you belong to any organization, and if you have a specific reason or purpose for attending here tonight. If you just can hold on a second. So this forum has been conducted, it's been recorded, and will be made available at sandag.org/ATI study, the website for our study for this specific project. The general rules: speakers will be given 3 minutes to speak to ensure equitable opportunities, and individuals can speak more than once, pending the number of speakers. We thank you for respectfully conducting to each other respectfully, and we ask you to abstain from promoting businesses, services, or any other initiatives. And so while we want to have your opinion and your feedback generally about the justice system, public security, and behavioral health system, we have a specific interest in receiving feedback regarding 6 questions. Those questions are going to be on the screen after our 15-minute presentation, but I'll just read them anyway right now so you can start preparing them. What are the greatest gaps in services in your community? The second is, what are the barriers to receiving services in your community? Question number 3 is, how can we encourage treatment that is voluntary as opposed to court order? Number 4, what are your greatest public safety concerns in your community and why? Number 5, do you know of any policies or programs that are effective alternatives to incarceration that the county should be aware of? And the last question is, what is working well in terms of the public safety system and services delivery you would like to know? I will now ask our data science director, Dr. Cindy Berg, to give us this 15 minute introduction to the ATI project. And finally, we will read the questions again.
Thank you, Octavio, and thank you everybody for joining us. Just to provide a little bit of a context for those of you who may not be as familiar for this project and why is SANDAG doing these community forums. During the pandemic, the county saw a significant decrease in the number of individuals who were housed at their jail, as well as the number of bookings. And this slide shows some analysis that we shared with the County Board of Supervisors, who were really the impetus for this project, providing the funding and wanting to do this data-driven analysis. And you can see that pre-COVID, which is January 2018 through February 2020, that there were over 6,600 monthly bookings on average. During COVID, you can see that large drop, that dropped to 3,800 on average, just to give you a sense of the vast differences in the number of people who were booked into jail. As part of our analysis, we also were trying to understand to the greatest degree that we could, what were some of those policy drivers behind those lower booking numbers and lower number of individuals in jail. And it's difficult to say that one certain policy was associated with just one outcome, because many times they were happening concurrently. As we all know from living through this pandemic, numbers are going up and down, so policies may be changed and modified. And there may have been situations also where the county had implemented a policy before the state did, and then the state later implemented a policy. But overall, there were 7 broad things that we noted in our report. One was court closures. Some individuals were released early from jail. There were also changes to bail schedules in terms of having to post bail, not have to have bail, zero bail programs. Modified booking criteria in terms of who actually could be booked into jail. Changes in probation supervision that decreased enforcement of probation violations and more of a focus on ensuring that the health and safety of individuals during the pandemic. No transfer to state custody from those who were local. And then also, this is outside the county's control, but we saw with our crime statistics that we monitor as part of SANDAG's Criminal Justice Clearinghouse, that there were large drops in some crime numbers when there was reduced opportunity to commit crime when people were staying at home, for example. And also, police and law enforcement may have been conducting less proactive policing in general, which also would have an impact on the number of individuals booked into jail. So there were 4 broad research questions, and the county was very specific in the contract. This was awarded to SANDAG through a competitive request for proposals. And they were very specific. And the reason that I say that is because our scope of work for this project is part of, we don't have a lot of flexibility in terms of what we're looking at. The county had specific research questions they wanted answered, and we're committed to doing that. But as I'll speak about later, they were also equally committed to wanting to get community input. They want to have recommendations that come from data, but they also want the community to use their lens, as well as a working group of those who are involved in the system, to be able to help us craft those policy interventions. With that said, as Octavio shared, we really are hoping to get some additional qualitative input tonight. We want to get some more thoughts on what your experiences are so that we can share that with the county. If something's not directly related to the questions we're looking at here, that feedback is still equally important, and we will make sure that that gets compiled into the data we're sharing with the county. So that's why I'm highlighting this and going off is we're very specific, but we also want to hear your voices so we can make sure we communicate that to the county. So for the first research goal was producing a data-driven analysis. There may be anecdotal information about what's going on, but we're trying to use every objective archival measure that we can to understand the trends that happened over time pre-COVID to during COVID. And then again, trying to understand what policy interventions could effectively, safely, and permanently reduce San Diego County jail populations. The second, again, referred back to those policy drivers, understanding why the jail numbers went down. And then also conducting a population sub-analysis, which we've completed in large part and is available on the ATI webpage, of looking at the individuals who are booked into jail, understanding their needs and characteristics, their booking charges, What we're going to be doing is looking at public safety outcome data for those who weren't booked to better understand what was their ongoing contact with the justice system, if any. And then again, it comes back to using that data and the community feedback to recommend policy changes to safely and permanently reduce jail populations and better protect public safety with alternatives to incarceration. The third was, again, coming back with recommendations. We don't want to do a report that's just going to be sitting on the shelf. It all comes back to what can we recommend based on the data and the feedback from the community on short and long-term actions and investments to expand access to alternatives to incarceration for justice-involved individuals who do not pose a public safety threat. And then the final question was to analyze the cost, savings, and long-term fiscal impacts to public safety departments, the Health and Human Services Agency, and other aspects of county operations by shifting the county approach to public safety to prioritize safety through services and evidence-based alternatives to incarceration. So 4 big questions, but what are we actually doing? So there's 5 big research parts that we're doing in this 1-year study. First is looking at the jail population data. And again, that's in a report largely summarized already on our website of understanding who was booked into jail for what compared to pre-COVID to during COVID, how did length of stays vary, understanding the needs, underlying needs of the population, and did they get needs prior to incarceration. Understanding who has continued contact with the justice system. We're going to be getting into this analysis in the coming months, and we'll be looking at all contact data from the ARGIS system of individuals who were contacted for low-level offenses, did not get booked into jail, and trying to understand what was their ongoing contact with the system and try to identify points for intervention that could have occurred. Next, we'll be trying to understand the needs of the justice-involved population that we're looking at who could potentially be diverted to alternatives to incarceration, understanding what services are out there that are county funded to meet those needs, and then identify gaps and barriers. We'll also be doing a best practice review of trying to look at proven and promising programs that could be implemented or expanded in San Diego County. And then that 4th research question is there in that 5th bar, trying to understand what would be the cost and potential savings of changing how the current system functions 1, 5, 10, and 20 years out. And then underlying all of these data systems, data analysis that really is relying quite a bit on system data is community engagement and feedback. We have a group of ATI advisory group members. There's 14 in total, 88 applied at the beginning of the project, and through an independent competitive review process. The individuals listed on the slide were selected. These are pictures of some of the individuals showing some of the diversity of the individuals we have on the group. And I know I saw before I started sharing my screen that a number of those individuals are on the community forum tonight. So I do hope that those of you who are here will speak up and share your thoughts and introduce yourself as advisory group members. We also have a working group that's made up of the Public Safety and Health and Human Services Department agencies and representatives, and we'll be adding a list with those individuals on the website, again, just for transparency. We've already done a community survey, so if you did also share your feedback through that form, that is really greatly appreciated. We're currently in the process of analyzing about the 2,000 surveys that we did get back in both English and Spanish that ask questions about being the victim of a crime, perceptions of crime and justice, and the successfulness of reentry services in the county. For those individuals who did have lived experience and have been incarcerated, asking about their underlying needs and the effect of incarceration, as well as what was the, if individuals had family members who had been incarcerated. So here's a kind of longer term look again at these steps. We're currently analyzing and summarizing those community surveys. We're having 4 community surveys, and this is the 2nd of the 4 that we're planning. We have another one next Tuesday night at 5:30 also, and then one next Thursday, July 7th in the middle of the day. And we'll be having 2 more community forums at the end of the year once we have a more comprehensive report to comment on. And we'll be continuing to compile those best practices, understanding the ongoing contact with the system, doing our gap analysis based on the needs and availability of services, and doing our cost study with an anticipated end date of the study in early of 2023. So Octavio shared the questions already with you. They are also on our website. If you need to review them, we're going to have to take the slide down so that other staff can share the timer for the speaker slides. But again, we'd love to know any thoughts you have. Please introduce yourself. Please share why you're here. We really want this to be a community dialogue to the degree that we can and make it feel like we're all in the same room, knowing that we're not. But to the most degree we can make everybody feel comfortable sharing about your perception of gaps in services, receiving services barriers, how can we encourage treatment, any public safety concerns you have, policies or programs that would be effective alternatives, and anything you think that may be working well that you think the county should consider expanding upon. If you have feedback to share outside, definitely all feedback is welcome, but we really want to make sure that our discussion is guided to the greatest degree possible, focused on those being able to help us craft the recommendations and really make sure that your community voice is shared with the Board of Supervisors. So thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for being here, and I'm going to turn it back over to Octavia.
Thank you very much, Cindy, and thank you very much for this great introduction to the program. So now we will open the floor to our attendees to share their insights. Participation is going to be up for 3 minutes, and there will be a timer on the screen so you can see when your time is up. So with no further ado, we'll welcome any comment from our audience tonight. And again, if you want to participate, raise your hand, and we will give you, we will open your microphone for your participation. And I see one hand here, Eric Revere. Eric, please.
Hi, Octavio. My name is Eric Revere. My wife and I are NAMI members and have been for almost 25 years. We have a 49-year-old son suffering from schizophrenia with co-occurring drug and alcohol addiction. He is currently homeless and has been arrested for drug use and possession, 5150s, 2 DUIs, and numerous other issues that we've had with him. The greatest gaps that we see are that the programs out there are fragmented. Unless you check all the boxes, you can't get into any of the programs, even on a voluntary basis. We desperately need to have what Supervisor Diane Jacob told us is a hammer. We need something to coerce these psychotic individuals, both homeless and living at home, into treatment and get them to stay there until the treatment is completed. Our son has been in at least a dozen voluntary treatment programs, but leaves before they are completed because there is no impotence to stay in them. And the barriers that we see and we have fought against, I served on the Mental Health Advisory Board, which is now the Behavioral Health Advisory Board, for several years, and worked with many advocates trying to implement, and we're finally successful in implementing Laura's Law, which does have a hammer. I noticed that SB 1338, the Care Court Act that Governor Newsom has proposed and the legislature has proposed, will implement what we call the black robe effect, or to compel these folks to get the treatment they need. Because if it's voluntary, it just will not work. Public safety concerns, I am on Nextdoor, and I cannot tell you how many of our neighbors are very concerned about psychotic, mentally ill people living on the streets and ranting and raving. They're afraid of them, and including our son when he visits us and is psychotic. We have had him committed on a 5150. He has been in probably 36 different independent living homes, but he is not in any kind of recovery. And right now we need that hammer, so to speak. I might add that when we were trying to implement Laura's Law, We ran up against a lot of opposition from taxpayer-funded advocacy groups such as the ACLU, and I noticed Human Rights Watch is now opposing SB 1338. This is a travesty because this is an act which I think will save lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric, and thank you for sharing your story. Certainly, we welcome very much your comments based on your own experience on gaps, barriers, and public safety concerns. Thank you very much, Eric. I see Anne Barron has her hand raised. And please.
And the previous speaker and his story and his son's story just go to my heart. And a lot of this, I think, has to do with when we closed down across the country. We closed down the psychiatric hospitals, and there were some good reasons to do that, right? They weren't some of them were more punishment than they were treatment. And I have to wonder, when folks leave treatment, is it that the treatment itself is not addressing what they need? So it's a complicated, complex question. So there does need to be some oversight of the treatment plans provided to ensure that folks are getting the treatment they need. And the other, as I think about people on the streets, just living on the streets can make you psychotic if you weren't already, that there do be mental health folks and almost like a volunteer patrol that go out and sit and talk with them. Because one of the things that I have learned in talking with folks on the street is they need to talk. They just need to be heard. And I would argue that that's part of the treatment to help bring them back to, I don't even know how to phrase this, but to help bring them back in a way that they can at least function and support themselves in our society.
Thank you very much, and for your intervention. And yeah, I think it's very important that treatment programs, oversight on treatment programs, and actually address that the programs address the needs. And I really highlight what you said, that our homeless population needs to be heard in order for these programs to work. Erin Meyer, please, you have up to 3 minutes. I don't think your mic is on, so let me make sure that.
Hey, yeah, can you hear me?
There you go. Now we can hear you.
Okay, thanks. Hi, I'm Erin Meyer. I'm a psychiatrist at UCSD, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I have been working as a psychiatrist at UCSD for about 3 years as faculty, and about 5 years before that as a resident psychiatrist. And one of the major gaps that I see are people who are on the streets with major neurocognitive disorder, dementia, and co-occurring substance use disorders. One of the major gaps that I see is adult protective services not assessing individuals who are homeless for concerns about self-neglect. And by removing the ability to assess older adults or dependent adults with dementia or major neurocognitive disorders who are clearly not functioning well on the street, having no community way to assess that is a huge gap that I see. I wish that I'm assuming that San Diego County has never voted on Welfare Institutions Code 15703 to 15705.4, which provides the ability to place a temporary protective order on people with dementia who are refusing services rather than let them languish on the street. Other gaps that I see or have been previously mentioned about substance use disorders and major neurocognitive disorders, and the inability to have any kind of treatment option if they're not, if the person is not willing or able to engage in voluntary residential placement. We have, our substance use disorder continuum of care is lacking. We have no ASAM 3.7 to 4 or 4.0 facilities. Hospitals don't receive any reimbursement for major neurocognitive disorders or alcohol use disorders beyond the initial withdrawal phase. So people come in and want the hospitals to address some of these issues, but there's no funding mechanism. And so it's a revolving door that leads to incarceration, continued homelessness, and along with major neurocognitive disorders, urinary and fecal incontinence are two very common reasons that individuals are asked to leave homeless shelters or independent living facilities. And when assisted living facilities and memory care facilities, the wait list for an assisted living waiver is more than 6 months. We have a shortage of buildings in Sandy. We have a 6-month wait list sometimes for IMD placement, for county behavioral placement, for assisted living, adult residential. We have a deficit in buildings, not a deficit necessarily in money, but a deficit in buildings and an understanding of some of the primary reasons that people can't access services. It's not that they're not willing to, it's the barriers that are placed so that they, for them to participate in those programs.
Thank you very much, Erin, for your contributions. And yeah, I think it's very important to address the fact that the self-neglect from people living in the streets, or to seek treatment, or to complete treatment when they're unwilling or unable to do so, and especially with the hospitals not equipped or prepared to deal with the problem, and some of the reasons for homeless people to be removed from shelters, and of course the wait list. Thank you for your contribution, Erin. We will welcome anyone else who wants to share thoughts and comments. I see Ben Conroe raise hand. Ben, please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Ben Conroe with Pro Mentors. Pro Mentors is a Christian mentoring program for men in San Diego County jails. We provide volunteer mentors for any man who wants one. Our mentors visit men while they're in custody and continue to meet with them after they're released. We've been doing this since 2013. Programs like ours depend on knowing when someone is going to be released from custody, and COVID threw a wrench into that system. Everyone in custody is eager to be released early, but if the programs that plan to help them don't know they're being released, they'll be on their own. So one of the questions asked about voluntary participation as opposed to court-ordered. Our program is completely voluntary, and we still have men who sign up in custody and then drop out as soon as they're released. Things look more or less appealing depending on your level of freedom. I hope the ATI project thinks through the motivation factor. An alternative to incarceration always looks appealing, but we need a different kind of motivation. Medical doctors tell me that substance use disorder causes physical damage to the frontal lobes of the brain, the area of the brain where we make decisions. It can take up to 2 years of sobriety for the frontal lobes to physically recover. That is, someone with substance use disorder may be physically incapable of making a reasonable decision. This is not the sociological or psychological damage, which is a major problem, of course. This is just the physical damage. This makes the voluntary part of alternatives even more complex. I think there are 4 reasons to put someone in custody: public safety, rehabilitation, punishment, and deterrence. Whatever the alternatives to incarceration may be, public safety needs to be the highest priority. I also wonder if the current conversation is a little too early. We don't yet know the long-term effects on crime rates that the COVID early releases might have. And if we make major changes, which I think everybody here believes we need to make, but if we make them too quickly, public safety will suffer. And from my perspective, public safety is the best reason to put someone in custody.
Thank you, Ben. And yes, we might not know, or we don't know the results just yet of this programs. And I believe that this project is a first effort to measure that, and comments and insights from the community are going to be extremely helpful, especially on matters as the ones you mentioned, voluntary programs and people not completing those programs upon release. And yeah, the need to make those programs more appealing, or have incentives for people to complete them. I will now allow somebody else to take the floor. I see a participant, DSA San Diego.
Hi, this is Jacob Vandehei with DSA San Diego, looking to highlight and looking for more information on proactive services to prevent houselessness, to prevent drug addiction, to prevent this recidivism in crime. Folks in this city have some of the highest cost of living expenses. What are some more of the proactive services to keep the rents down, to make sure that rents aren't going up to a degree where people aren't being forced out onto the street? Our recent counts have shown that our houseless neighbors, 85% of them became houseless in San Diego, which means they were paying rent at one time. They did own a home at one time, but due to some sort of big cost of living shift, they were forced out onto the street. How are we going to be proactive about our aging population, some of whom may not have children looking out for their interests as they grow up from 65 to 70 to 80? What state services are being provided to make sure that their rent isn't going up an extraordinary degree, that they're not being exploited by the landlord, that someone is looking out for them over the years as they age to make sure they're not put in a position where they are becoming houseless? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacob, and thank you for bringing this very important issue of housing costs as a major trigger for homelessness. Before we continue, I would like to remind you that we, even though we have specific questions to ask, we would like people, if they want to even comment on other participants' contributions, so we can make this more of a conversation. So please don't hesitate to comment on anything that other participants have mentioned. I have Evie Kosovo.
Yeah, hi. I'm with the board of Amicus, which is a group that builds small temporary cabins while people are waiting. And of course, with those cabins come the facilities of bathrooms and food and services coming. But I don't not really want to promote that at the moment. We are building one in El Cajon and getting quite a bit of interest. I do want to mention something else which I came across, which is a report from the Seattle Law School that looked at the homeless situation, and we know that it is growing rather than becoming less these days. And they keep getting moved from camps and cleaned out, their stuff thrown away, and that hasn't stopped. The criminalization continues. They're suggesting that some of the tent areas be, if not set up in places where out of the way of the rest of most of the public and commercial establishments, and allow them to be in tents with their communities, which are important to them, and give them the facilities there while they are waiting, rather than this small groupings constantly be cleared out and moved around. It's quite inhumane. I think they make a good point of how it's worked in Seattle, And I think they should be looked at here. Thank you.
Thank you, Evie, and thank you for pointing out programs or initiatives that might have been successful outside of San Diego County. As we do our study on best practices, is certainly is going to be very, very helpful for us. We now welcome anyone who wants to comment. I don't see any hands raised. Please raise your hand in the reaction button below your screen.
I believe Anne's hand is raised.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't see Anne's hand.
I
Anne?
see Anne, Robert, and Aaron's hand raised.
I apologize for that. I'm not seeing it, but please, I do see it now. Okay, yeah, Anne, please go ahead.
Hi, yeah. I just was really listening to the last several comments. And do we have a good analysis of why folks are in jail in San Diego County? That would help a lot with determining what we need to do, what services we need to provide. Are they there because they became psychotic after living on the streets, or are they there because they were kicked out of their house and they needed to get money, or are they there for, and we haven't even talked about white collar crime as well, which is more invisible to some extent. So have you all done an analysis, or is there an analysis available that we can see what are some of the crimes and then reasons why these folks engaged in these crimes?
I can try to answer that. Sorry, I'm trying to turn on my video and it wasn't working. It's a complicated question, and if there are service providers on here, or we could promote Andrew, who's our county contact, who used to be with the public defender's office. We do interviews in the jail called substance abuse monitoring. And so we know from that study that 4/5 of the males who were booked into jail that we were able to do a drug test with are testing positive for drugs. Over half are there for meth. We have data in there about their drug use history, and we did share that information with the Board of Supervisors about the average years of use, which is very significant. We know that 70% have said that they've been homeless and at one time in their life at all. But again, it's that chicken and egg. We know about with mental health that many are reporting that they have mental health issues as well. But as I believe one of the speakers said earlier, the first with his son, there's many people who have dual diagnosis with substance use and mental health. And we know with some of the drugs even getting more toxic, are people self-medicating with the mental health issue first and then getting addicted to drugs. We do ask individuals if they commit property crime to support a drug habit. So I think it's a number of different issues. The analysis that we did comparing, and I'm not sure, Daniel, if you can speak. I don't know if other individuals can see the chat if I put a link to the report in here, but if you do go to ATI study on our website at Sandag, we have all of our reports that have gone to the county, and we did do an analysis of the characteristics of who was in jail pre-COVID and post based on the highest booking charge, how that varied over time, what the highest, the top 20 charges for booking were, which is interesting. And I can try to pull that up to share in between our next speakers if you'd like to see that. And I think that could lead to some good discussion, and we're happy to share some of that data. Sorry, it's such a long answer, but we do know some about underlying need, but I think everybody's story is different, how they get there. But happy to share that data with you.
Thanks. And I would like that. I'm just going to say that, everyone's story is different. Absolutely. But there are similarities, there are trends. And so, if drug abuse is not the reason why people are committing crimes, I mean, and what considered a crime changes, right, depending on what council does. I just want to make sure that we're also thinking about the reasons why as we think about services and wrap around help and support.
That's an excellent point, and I'll pull up the PowerPoint, Octavio, if we get to the point where other people, I don't want to take away other people's time, but then if we have time at the end, I can share that.
Certainly. Thank you, Cindy, and thanks, Anne. Next in line was Cheryl.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Canson, and I'm a community leader, and I advocate for mentally ill people to receive treatment instead of incarceration. There absolutely needs to be alternatives to incarceration. My son, Jordan Jackson, is suffering with bipolar, and he's in prison. And he has, since being in prison, he's been allowed to bargain. And to say that he wanted to be over in this other part of the prison to be with his friends. And they said, if you want to, only way you can go over there to that, be over there with your friends, is you have to come down to a lower level of service. Well, that to me says that there needs to be some education, and the prisons don't prioritize the mental health, because that should not have happened. It is not a choice. Mental health treatment is not a choice. It's not an option. It's a vital and crucial need. And so, yeah, my son suffered dearly from that. And he's declining and falling in every loophole available in the prisons. He's got heroin addiction. He's had COVID twice. He's got 2 beatings by prison guards, and no relief in sight for my son. It's all looked at and increased his charges. He's been in the shoe for it. He's got staff assault and just declining in further punishment. Isolation is not good for mentally ill people. They need to be separate departments. Mental illness, mental health treatment, and prisons do not need to intertwine and have the responsibilities of providing mental health treatment.
Thank you very much, Cheryl, for your comment and for sharing your story. And of course, I'm sorry for what you're going through. And of course, it's really important what you mentioned about viable treatments that actually address the problem in people incarcerated, and to address the fact of self neglect on these treatments. I have more people lined up for discussion, but I know we have some advisory group members in the audience tonight, and I want just to acknowledge them: Betsy, Darwin, Ian, and Manny. And please, if you want to share any comments or insights with the audience, you're welcome to very much. Next in line is Robert Forte, San Diego.
Good evening. Can I be heard clearly? Can you hear me?
Yes, Robert, we can hear you.
Thank you. So this is a lot to cover in 3 minutes. You would actually need a couple of days, but I'll try to touch upon as much as I can within the 3-minute period. So first and foremost, when we looked at the public safety issue, it was a public health issue that was more a crisis, because the public safety issue didn't close down the courts. The public safety didn't close down social services, the DMV, or Social Security, or all the other services that individuals needed. It was public health. It's problematic. Me as a Cal Voices ambassador for the state of California under CCJVH, or as a consultant on MAT and for the Sheriff's Department, or as a case manager whose caseload was over 100 clients. I was able to see all the barriers, all the cracks in the concrete, all the flaws in treatment, whether they came from probation or whether they came from parole. If we use just those two as a starting block, during COVID, the mass releases, 75% of the individuals released from custody were released homeless without any communication device. So the agents couldn't even keep up with them. They were overwhelmed. So this is more about system design and system flaws and system failures. It trickles back down to the community, but we are creating a have and have not society where we have a greater population living in our canyons than that can afford low income homes. Our carceral environments are imposing so much trauma on individuals that an individual is conditioned by that environment and he's not reconditioned before he's released. So he comes out of custody with the same mindset that he had when he went in or why he was there, which is survival. The county needs to be in the housing business, supporting and developing partners for housing. The programs need to be linked together. Every program should be linked like warm handoff. So there's no breaks in services. And last but not least, overall, I think Dr. Myers was pretty close. You know, our system design is a failure, but we don't have the right assessments, and then we're not following up on the assessments. I don't know, I can't say if I'm right or wrong in regards to care court, but we've had an opportunity, but we're not trying to fix it. And that's the problem.
Thank you very much, Robert, and especially for pointing out the issue of a major systemic failure of the design of our systems. Next in line, we have Erin Meyer.
Hi, thank you again for allowing me to speak. Erin Meyer, psychiatrist at UCSD, speaking on behalf of myself. I was thinking about what a couple people have said about data, and I'm not sure amongst the people who have been incarcerated over the last couple of years, most frequently, if what percentage of them have not only homelessness but also connection to Social Security, and the duration of time between release from jail and reinstatement of Social Security. That's a huge barrier that I see with people with cognitive problems. And then also, I wanted to mention, look, as a society, I think we improve based on what we track, and changing quality metrics and looking closer at this, the highest number of or like the people who have been in jail for the most frequent amount of time. Have they attempted to locate housing through the homeless information management systems and kind of cross-link jail populations with the homeless information management systems like coordinated entry system to see where the breakdown was? Because I presume that with homelessness comes greater engagement in our legal system. And if we're tracking, like if our ACT teams, if our health clinics are tracking not only transitions to transitions out of homelessness, but also transitions to homelessness, I think that holding some of our agencies accountable for the housing status and making sure that they're in the right kind of housing is really important to decrease people's engagement in our jail systems who have no business being there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erin. And just to remind you that you are welcome to participate more than once. I know we have the 3-minute limit. But if you want to raise more issues or comment about other things, please feel free to raise your hand. In your case, Robert, if you want to participate again, we will welcome your comments. Next in line is Paul Alexander.
Yeah, hi, thank you for the, I guess, calling on me or whatever. I'm still getting used to the Zoom world. I mean, I think it's important for us to ask a number of questions. And the most important of this is in this conversation around incarceration, particularly in San Diego County, is what are we doing? We now live in a country that has the highest rate of human caging of any society in the recorded history of the modern world. We incarcerate more of our citizens, more of the people who are living in our communities than any other country on the planet Earth. We are putting them into cages and subjecting them to unbelievable cruelty, to violence of the highest level, sexual assault, a literal breakdown in everything that we as a supposedly civil and developed society hold value to. Enforced into situations of enforced and encouraged racial segregation. We are literally caging human beings. The other question that we have to ask is, who are we doing it to? We are not punishing criminals. We are punishing poverty. We are punishing people who cannot afford a skewed bail system. We are punishing the overwhelming majority, over 90% of the people who are being charged with crimes cannot afford lawyers. We are punishing poor people. We are punishing Black people whose communities are over-policed. We are punishing immigrant communities whose communities are criminalized just for where they come from or what language that they speak. What we have is a punishment bureaucracy that has very little to do with public safety. Where is the evidence that any of us are safer because of incarceration? It has very little to do with public safety and everything to do with hiding our societal failures. Until we understand that we have to address the roots and the structures that lead to so-called crimes, until we understand that we have a two-tier system that favors the rich and looks down on the poor, we will never have public safety, and frankly, we won't deserve it. Caging humans does not solve the problem, and we have to do better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you for raising deepest questions, such as why do we incarcerate and who do we incarcerate in this system. Thank you for your comment. I have now one.
I see Jarwin's hand raised, one of our
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Cindy, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I see Jarwin's hand raised. In case you didn't see that.
Yeah, I accidentally muted myself. Darwin, please, one of our advisory board members.
Hello. Can you hear me?
We can hear you well, Darwin. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Darwin Fishman, he hands, and I certainly want to follow my brother Khalid, but let me just, I wanted to say, so just thank Sandag for this and the community forums. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate the contributions, what people have been sharing with us. And following what has been said by Khalid and others, I would just encourage folks in helping us with this process and this work to really to do the part about thinking outside the box in terms of incarceration and what typically exists. And I just wanted to give a quick example of this to try to think about opening this up and how many different parts are included in this. And then also the part about also why the data and what Ann was asking about is so important, and how difficult it is to track this and what's going on, which is one of the hats I used to wear. Was on the community review board on police practices, and we looked at all the complaints against the San Diego Police Department. And I remember one of the complaints we got was for someone from the on-house community that was using a bathroom, I believe it was in Starbucks, it's taking too long. The police were called. They eventually came, they broke down the door, physical altercation, they arrested him. The arrest records are going to show something along the lines of like resisting arrest. When in truth, what came out is that the person was using the bathroom to clean up, and that was his place that he'd go in the morning. And on one level, you can say, for example, for alternatives incarceration, well, what about things like public restrooms, clean, accessible restrooms? How much would that help? And I appreciate also people from the community coming that are service providers, things like UC San Diego, health providers, counselors calling in, because ultimately we got to hopefully deal with, if there are better service available and accessible for more people, how much of a dent would that make in the criminal justice population? How many people that are ending up with law enforcement are ones that could be served better by non-law enforcement solution? How many people are in a revolving door? I've also seen with the ride-alongs with the police when I was on the CRB, there were a lot of people from the house community that have not just been arrested once or 5 times or 10 times, but over 100 times. How many people then are getting arrested, incarcerated, getting out, and then getting arrested again? How productive is that? How much does that help those people? Would they be better served by not being arrested and put in jail, but providing other services for them? If they're provided other services as a first alternative, not as a second or third, would that then also keep them out of jail? These are the sort of questions I think would be helpful for people to raise, and sort of issues that help us as we go forward and do our work. So I want to thank everyone for their contributions, and hopefully we'll be able to continue to work together on this.
Thank you very much, Darwin, and of course, thank you for reminding us of thinking outside the box and try to think of alternative and non-law enforcement solutions to these problems. I have Robert next in line. Robert, please.
Yeah, thank you. This is fantastic. It's actually it can be ongoing. So one of the things I also like to mention that I didn't get to mention prior is that we're actually living in a very primitive society. No matter how many futuristic things are developed, we're still living primitive. And I say that because we have a system that is incarcerating youth at a number that is phenomenal. Maybe not as big, California is not as bad as other states, but other than murder or a capital crime of severe violence, our children shouldn't be getting felonies. They shouldn't even be getting misdemeanors. We've taken the preschool to prison pipeline and turned it into the farm team for state prison and for mental health and for homelessness. It is so ironic that we spend a lot of time developing best practices, but it takes us a year or 2 years to implement them. One of the things I learned during COVID and servicing my population and my clients was I used adaptive practices. The things I seen that worked right then are the things I continue to use. The issue that came up again was about housing versus conditions and diagnosis. You know, I can't find an ADA bed, and I find that almost disturbing, especially since ADA is a law, and any county or federal contract should include that should be mandatory. Then the contracts. Wow, who's designing these contracts, especially for our children, that they have so many exclusionary factors? The child that commits violence is the child that needs the most care and the most amount of treatments, but he's excluded. And then our incarceration. I heard someone talk about how bad and violent prison is. You could only imagine that the things that happen in the adult system also happen in the juvenile system. It's a whole different society behind bars. You know, we have a constable that can't even guarantee the safety of an individual in custody. More or less, we're talking about public safety on the street. If we can't keep them alive in jail, how are we gonna keep them alive on the street? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert, and thank you very much for reminding us that we should find better practices, but even more, we have to find better ways to expedite implementation of those recommendations. I don't see anyone's hand in the list. Oh, now, yeah, I see Eric Revere.
Just wanted to make a quick comment to Dr. Burke about the lower booking numbers. I spoke to a couple of police officers, and as everyone knows, the police officer on the street is not allowed to speak to anyone officially. But off the record, they basically told me that after arresting, that they did not want to expose themselves unnecessarily to COVID because they get spit upon by a number of people in the street. Also, they're very well aware of the revolving criminal justice system, revolving door criminal justice system. And the third reason is that they because of all the news exposure of police shootings, they basically have backed off a little bit. Now, this is not official in any way, shape, or form, but I think in some small way it probably contributes to the lower numbers of bookings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. I don't see any other hands, so I don't know if Cindy, do you want to just take a minute to mention about the report you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, I put it in the chat, so let me just pull up the PowerPoint to be able to show it. So hold on one second. Sorry, the computer's just been very slow. I'm getting the wheel of death right now.
And while Cindy is pulling up the presentation, I remind you we still have about a half an hour, a little more for participation. So please help us get more feedback and more insights about possible alternatives to incarceration.
If Betsy's still on, I know Betsy's had some great input on our advisory group meetings. I don't know if she'd like to maybe share some thoughts.
We put in the spot, Betsy, but
can you hear me?
yes, Betsy, we can hear very well. Thank you for participating.
So people who have spoken, I resonate with so much of what you say, and the issues are incredibly complex. We talk about people who have mental health problems, but mental health problems really vary a great deal. And we need to understand that not everyone is, you know, those of us who are walking around the streets could very well be having some forms of mental health problems, but we aren't finding ourselves arrested or in those kinds of situations. And that will be true of the population of people who get arrested. As best I understand, and I have been a probation officer, I have people who I know very well who are sitting in prison now or in jail. And one place that people get themselves into problems, particularly people of color, is they end up being arrested, they end up being arraigned, and they are told by their attorneys, because of their color sometimes, that they might as well take a plea bargain so that the sentencing will be less for them than it will be were they to try to go to trial. And this, in my mind, is a travesty. I think particularly since those plea bargains and then the time of sentencing is just disproportionate. And like the gentleman said who talked about our system being caging people, we are really caging our men and women. We are treating them like animals that we wouldn't treat animals. And while the situation is incredibly complex in terms of how we take a look at mental health, life history, reasons why we're on the streets, we need so many options. And from my own point of view, I've been in San Diego County for quite a long time, and we've had programs on alternatives to incarceration for as many years as I've been here, which is about 30 years. And they have been various programs, and each of them have been good programs. Maybe they needed improvement, but in fact, what happened was a new leader came in and they were dropped, or funding changed and they were dropped. And I'm just trying to figure out, as part of this advisory board, and so I'm so grateful to the community, is how do we do this different this time? How do we make a difference? And I think you all are talking about the right issues. And we on the advisory group need to continue to do that. I don't know if that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Betsy. Cindy, do you want to present, or we ask another person to participate?
I will start sharing my video and then I can share, but I don't want to take away from someone. I think somebody has their hand raised. So if somebody,
correct. Cheryl has her hand raised.
okay, let's do that and then I can share. I don't want to take away from anyone speaking.
Certainly. Cheryl, thank you.
Yes, I wanted to familiarize and share with y'all that I'm one of the co-authors of this bill, AB 1630. And it's vulnerable defendants' right to a fair trial. And it should help our people who are mentally ill and disabled other ways to not be railroaded through a court system without being an aid in their own defense. I feel like that will help people get the treatment versus just channeling them into prisons and jails and cages. It will also make the courts research the history to see whether a person has been deemed incompetent to stand trial previously. And court processes will stop until a person is restored to competency before they're just continued in the court process and just railroaded into prisons without, being in the proper headspace to represent themselves or even help their attorney represent themselves and account for the experience and the situation that happened. And so I just wanted to share that with y'all, and the incompetence to stand trial will also be filed in the DOJ so that the tendency to fall in the cracks will be less likely. And we're on Instagram, Moms Against Torture. We're on Facebook, Moms Against Torture is a petition, and we're going through the judicial process right now. We're in the Assembly. We're in the Senate, and we passed the public safety. We need to pass the appropriations. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Cheryl. Cindy?
Okay. So this was the presentation that we shared. Is it showing?
Yes.
Yes.
Cindy.
Okay, so so what this analysis shows is we looked at the monthly average number of individuals housed in sheriff's department detention facilities. And we looked at whether they were there for a highest charge that was felony or misdemeanor, and if it was if they were sentenced or unsentenced. And what I'd like to highlight here is that you could see the pre-COVID period, which again was prior to March of 2020, compared to the during COVID period. In both of those time periods, most of the people who were housed in jail were there for felonies, not for misdemeanors. You can see 91% pre-COVID, 97% during COVID. There was significant reductions in the number of misdemeanors who were housed. So this isn't just booked, this is actually housed into jail. And you can see what a small percentage are actually there just for a misdemeanor, both pre-COVID and after, but those were the biggest drops. Sentenced misdemeanors went down 88%, unsentenced misdemeanors went down 59%, and sentenced felons went down 47%. The smallest change was for those who were unsentenced for a felony. That was 5%. Let's make sure I'm gonna go down to the next slide. This shows, again, some more change about pre-COVID to during COVID. A greater percentage of those who were booked into jail were booked for a felony. 59% were booked for a felony compared to a misdemeanor during COVID. A greater percentage for violent offenses during the period of the pandemic. About 1 in 3 were booked for a violent offense. A smaller percentage were booked for a drug offense, 27 to 16. And there was also a smaller percentage booked for a warrant offense. What this shows is it summarizes there were 20 charges that made up 4/5 of all bookings, both pre-COVID, it was 88%, and 78% during COVID. And so this could be that it wasn't just necessarily their highest charge, but somebody had one of these charges during booking. And what I'd like to highlight here is that there were 8 charges. The greatest number were alcohol, drug offenses, 6 violent offenses, 3 property offenses, and then 3 types of violations. So you can see, and then the bold ones that are highlighted show the top 6 charges pre-COVID and during COVID. So you can see there was disorderly conduct. 12% and 13% of individuals had some type of, had that charge. It could be combined with something else. Possession of a non-narcotic drug, that went from 12% to 2%. So that was the biggest change that we saw pre-COVID to during COVID. DUI represented about 1 in 10. Under the influence for some type of substance was about 1 in 20, both during and pre. I'm sorry, pre and during. You can see domestic violence doubled. It was 5% had that type of booking charge pre compared to 9% during. Battery on a significant other was 5 and 7%. And then the other charges, just give you a sense of what those were. Possession of a narcotic drug, possession of a controlled substance drug, possession of drug paraphernalia, another DUI, and violent assault with a deadly weapon, violation of a domestic violence order, restraining order, obstructing or resisting police, assault with force, and property burglary, vehicle theft, and vandalism, and then violations for lash incarceration for those who are under AB 109. Violation of parole and probation violation. Some length of stays, without getting into a statistics lesson. You can see that this shows the bars are the mean length of stay. Median is the pink line. And this shows both pre and post by the highest book type of booking charge. So you can see that pre-COVID, not surprisingly, the median is for those who think about housing prices. They report the median housing price because those $1 million homes in La Jolla and Del Mar could skew the mean. So the median is actually the better reflector of average. And so you can see that on average, most people actually don't stay in jail very long. The median was 3 for violent and drug, 4 days for property, 1 day for other, 6 for a weapon offense. And you can see all of those decreased except for property crimes. So, and as one would expect also, there was a higher mean and median for weapon and violent offenses, and lower lengths for other ones, just to kind of give you a sense of how long people are in jail. We did find, and we're going to be exploring this some more, but talking about disproportionality, we did find that more minorities were booked into jail during COVID compared to prior to. This shows the average length of stay, mean and median, again, by ethnicity. And you can see that African-American Black individuals did have, their median was 4 days compared to 2 or 1 days for the other races, ethnicities. And then it was 2 days compared to 1 during the period of COVID. That shows disproportionality again, which is statistics we've all seen before in terms of the population composition of San Diego County. And you can see African American individuals, 5% of San Diego's population, but 3 times as many of the jail population, both pre and during COVID. This is not a total detailed analysis. And again, this link is in the chat for anybody who wants to access this later. We did try to better understand the offense types that individuals were booked for by race, ethnicity. And this isn't a multivariate, sophisticated analysis, but just to try to dig a little bit deeper. And we are going to be looking into that more to understand why that variation in race, ethnicity was there. These data go to some of the statistics that we shared about need from our substance abuse monitoring program. The assessment data in the jails is protected by confidentiality and HIPAA. So, and we can provide more information. Again, this is on our website, but you can see that in 2020, and we actually have updating data from 2021 that's coming out that most individuals, 82% of adult males and 67% of adult females were positive for a drug, booked into jail. 57% of males were positive for meth, 53% of, 53% of females were positive for meth. It didn't matter what they were booked for as a highest or most serious charge. You can see that 72% to 83% were positive for some type of drug. We asked them, and this shows you the past 3 years, 2018, 19, and 20. Have you ever stayed overnight for mental health treatment? And have you ever been diagnosed with a mental health disorder? So obviously, if somebody didn't want to share that information with us, or they had not gotten treatment yet or a diagnosis, it's an undercount, but you can see that it was 31 and 37%, so that they had stayed overnight or been diagnosed. This shows primarily homeless in the past 30 days and also ever homeless. And you can see 70% of those books said that they were ever homeless. And we found that those who were booked for a property offense were more likely to say that they were ever homeless. So just some of the stats that we had there, and again, you have that link in there, but in case, as Octavia said, we have about, I believe, a half hour left. So in case that generates any other discussion among the group, or there's anybody else on from the advisory group who would like to say anything, or Andrea, if you'd like to say anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. We don't have any hands right now, so I don't know if anyone from the advisory board or Andrea. Oh, I have Robert. Robert,
Yeah.
please.
Okay, thank you. So as the topics change, so does the dialogue and the narrative. One of the things that I'm going to respond to is the CARE court and competency rulings. I find that to be very problematic, first and foremost, because it's the judge who is rendering the decision of competency. And that's almost as backwards as can be, because it wouldn't be acceptable if a psychologist or a psychiatrist was rendering a judgment on a criminal case. So clearly the judge is kind of acting outside the scope of his practice. So that needs to be fixed. And then in addition to that, all of these things that we've been discussing, they are usually linked to some form of childhood trauma. But we understand the ACEs and the adverse childhood experiences, and how the health disparities are primarily physical. But the carceral ACEs, those are the ones that are creating the overwhelming levels of PTSD, co-occurring PTSD, complex PTSD. And we're not addressing that as those are real diagnoses. They're almost like invisible scars or invisible wounds that we don't want to treat because we can't see them or see the scar that is a result of them. So with that existing, one of the things that I did find out and study was the University of Cincinnati put out a report March 2020, the trauma, the communities of color exposure to the criminal justice system. And one of the most interesting lines, segments in it was, we as a society are committed to treating ACEs as a public health crisis that they represent. It is incumbent upon our legal system to examine where and how it is complicit in perpetrating trauma upon children and adults of color. Additionally, the legal system must address how it intervenes, both at an individual and a structural level, to eliminate the practices that are contributing to this. When people go into our system, if they don't come out better than when they went in, our system is not working. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. And I have Paul Alexander next in line. Paul?
Yeah, hi, I'm so used to waiting for like 300 people to speak before, public discussions like this, that I'm always surprised I get called on so quickly. So I appreciate the way you all are running this. A couple of kind of reflections and then a question that I'm hoping that this body will be able to look into. One is the reflection is looking at the statistics that we were given and the racial disparities. How is it not criminal that we are incarcerating people based off of race? I don't see any other way to kind of look at those statistics and not recognize this as a crime. I mean, it's literally mind-boggling to me and difficult to understand how we can be sitting here and having conversations when a lot of people describe it as a complex issue. It doesn't look very complex to me when we look at those numbers. The question that I would like for you all to pursue is, I was under the understanding that people had a constitutional right not to be jailed or incarcerated without a trial or before a trial. I believe something over 30 years ago that the Supreme Court explained in the United States versus Salerno, quote, "In our society, liberty is the norm and detention prior to or without trial is the carefully limited exception. Clearly in San Diego, incarceration without trial and before trial is not the exception, it's the rule, particularly when it comes to people who cannot afford bail. Can this body look into how it's possible that we're violating people's constitutional rights in favor of overzealous prosecutors and judges who apparently just choose to ignore that Supreme Court ruling? Question mark, period. I'm done.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. And certainly this study will give us a lot of light on how this measures have performed and if it's feasible to continue with the implementation. Please, we still have few more minutes. If there's somebody from the audience who just hasn't participated and is willing to make a brief comment, we welcome you. Any members of the community, of the advisory board, or anyone just who wants to make a final reflection. Cheryl, I see your hand. Please go ahead. You're on mute, Cheryl.
Thank you. I want to know how we can review this recording and also the last one. How can we, look back at it and get some information that maybe we missed or?
So our first forum is online on the study webpage, which is www, and I can put that in the chat, sandag.org ATI study. And as soon as we get this one ready tomorrow, we'll post it again.
Okay, can you please put it in the chat so I can?
I will. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
I have Ann Barron.
I have a couple of questions related first to the pandemic and the reduced incarceration. Wasn't there an executive order from the governor to stop arresting people, or at least the arrest shouldn't also involve jail time?
We summarized some of the different changes that came down from the state in our interim report. And I just realized the link had been broken, so we're going to get that reposted tomorrow. And so that will be on that same website that I just put up there, so you can see our description in more detail of all the primary drivers about what the state had ordered. I think that might be a little simplistic but for example,
but he did order a reduction in incarceration during COVID, right?
Yeah, well, so like here's an example. There was and Andrea, I'm not sure if you want to add to some of this since you're more directly involved. But for example, 10851, which is auto theft, was became a charge that wasn't booked into jail during the pandemic. So there was different types of modifications. It just didn't say don't book people. There was very specific penal codes that were beyond the scope of our analysis. But Andrea, would you be able to add anything?
I was just going to say that the order was really related. I don't know specifically about the governor and the governor's order or any particular from him. I'd have to look into that. But I do know that for a period of time, there was a emergency bail schedule put into place that made pretty much all misdemeanors, but with the exception, I think, of just a few, all $0 bail along with probation violations, and then certain felonies. I think all felonies except
had zero bail.
Correct, but I don't know about.
So I'm just going to ask that we also consider that as part of reducing incarceration, right? That we consider that executive order and perhaps making it permanent.
Well, unfortunately, very recently, well, that order changed in June of 2020 because the order was rescinded, and then jurisdiction.
Right. I'm just talking about what we can do in our county. That is an example of one of the reasons why incarceration was reduced, is that people didn't have to stay in if they couldn't pay the bail because there was no bail.
No, I agree. I think it's a definitely a great alternative to look at.
Okay, that's what I want to put on the table.
Thank you, Ann, and thank you, Andrea, for clarification on this. We have Paul Alexander.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to make sure, because I didn't hear an answer. I was actually asking a question the last time on whether or not the body that I'm speaking to tonight can actually look into whether or not judges and prosecutors are actually committing a crime according to that Supreme Court ruling that I mentioned. The name of that ruling was the United States versus Salerno.
So we're not lawyers or legal staff, and that's not directly within the scope of the study here to do that. But this is something that, again, we want to share this type of information and feedback. It will be discussed with the advisory group, and this is something that your feedback directly will be something that will be brought forth. So we can't actually come up with a legal answer for you as part of the study on this, but your voice and that opinion will be shared.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Cindy. Darwin.
All right, just in response to Khalid, your point, actually, there is things that we can look at for alternatives to incarceration. We can look at police practices and things like racial profiling. I believe San Diego City Council is going to be looking at the PROTECT Act. If there's measures that make a difference for racial profiling and that reduces the rate of racial minorities getting arrested and or the discrepancy, then that's definitely within our realm of things that we can look at and we need to address. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you, Darwin. We still have 15 more minutes. I would ask everybody who's not participated if they wanted to share something, if they want to bring some issue that hasn't been discussed tonight, some other suggestions or best practices that we can find or that we can look into, or some general public security concerns. If you want, I will read again the questions just to so you can have them fresh in your mind, and you can comment on those if you want. The first question that we posed for this community forum was, what are the greatest gaps in services in your community? The second question, what are barriers to receiving services in your community? So we have gaps and barriers. Number three is, how can we encourage treatment that is voluntary as opposed to court order? So that is promoting voluntary programs that are not necessarily ordered by judicially ordered. Number four is, what are your greatest public safety concerns in the community and why? The fifth question is, do you know of any policies or programs that are effective alternatives to incarceration that the county should be aware of? And the final question is, what is working well in terms of the public safety system and services delivery you would like to know? Again, those are the 6 questions this group and this study's very interested in. And if you have any additional comment or feedback on any of those, will be much appreciated. And I also remind you, if you weren't able to participate today, you can do so by sending comments or questions or any feedback or input to the email for this study, and that is atastudy@sandac.org. Again, that's atistudy@sandac.org. I'll put it in the chat so you can look at it. And so if you think of something that you didn't share or you weren't able to share, please do so through this email. And I see Lily Rani's hand. Lily.
Hi there. Yeah, I apologize if this is not exactly on the topic of incarceration, but in terms of services that seem missing, I would really like to see mental health response teams that are not embedded with the police. I'm afraid to call for help when I see somebody in my neighborhood who might be going through some kind of crisis, because I don't know what the escalation with police will be. We saw that Dr. Yan Lee, I believe, in Little Italy was basically shot and killed by the police recently. So with Asian Solidarity Collective proposed that these mental health teams need to not be embedded. So that's one thing I would like to see. And I was canvassing in City Heights last Saturday, and several people that we talked to, when we asked them if they feel safe in the neighborhood, the things that are making them feel unsafe are, people who don't have housing. It's not homeless people who are the problem. It's that there isn't housing, and so then people kind of end up in like chaotic mental states and then make people who are in the neighborhood sometimes feel unsafe. So I wanted to offer that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lee. Those are very interesting points. Mental health response teams that are not embedded in public safety, and of course, again, the housing situation that's causing the triggering people being out in the streets. We still have 10 more minutes. Any final comments? Any final thoughts? I remind you that this, as well as our previous community forums, videos are going to be available in our website. Actually, the first one's already available, and this one's going to be available tomorrow in our website. And again, you can find more information regarding this study and other information on our website, sandec.org. Any members of the advisory forum? Andrea, Cindy, would you like to make a final comment, final contribution?
No, I just thank you for the chance, Octavio. Thank you, everybody. This has been a really rich discussion. It'd be great if we could be in person, but we really did want to make this as easy as it could be for people to get on. And I again wish we could have it a little bit more flowing and a natural way. We just never know how many people are going to be able to get on here. So we want to keep it fair and equitable. So, but thank you for your rich dialogue. If you still have more input to share, we will be having 2 more forums next week, next Tuesday night and next Thursday afternoon. So please get the word out about this, because your comments do make a difference and do matter. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Cindy. And yeah, as Cindy just mentioned, the next community forum is going to be held next Tuesday, July 5th at 5:30 p.m. And then the 4th and last community forum is going to be, hold on a second, because I lost it here. It's going to be on Thursday, July 7th at 11:30 morning. Again, thank you very much for being here today. We value and appreciate your comments, and we have been taking notes, and we have been recording this forum, and those your participation, your insight is going to be very useful for us to put context to the numbers and the statistics. We don't want this program, this research, to be only about cold numbers. In your personal stories, your concerns, your questions are going to help us make this a much more robust and a better study, and probably figure out better ways to analyze and to address alternatives to incarceration in San Diego County in the future. Again, on behalf of SANDAG, on behalf of the Data Science Division, and Dr. Cindy Borg, the director, and the criminal justice team, Octavio Rodriguez, the principal manager of the criminal justice team, we thank you for being here tonight. And we also want to thank all of our team who made possible to have this forum tonight, everyone at SANDAG and our interpreter who helped us have this very successful second community forum. I hope to see you all again, and we will see you again next week. Thank you very much, everyone.